What if the person you're holding on to is the very thing blocking your breakthrough? These 3 signs might just be God's final warning, and the third one will break your heart. But it could also save your destiny. Don't miss this. God will never ask you to sacrifice your peace to keep a person. Peace is not just a feeling. It's a divine gift, a spiritual signal, and often a holy boundary. When God gives you peace, He is giving you Himself, His presence, His assurance, and His direction. God will bet you it isn't. God will bet you it isn't. Peace he went with his own God. He asked, and when that peace starts to fade in a relationship, it is often the first sign that something is out of alignment with His will. We sometimes confuse commitment with compromise, loyalty with bondage, and endurance with silence, thinking that God is pleased with our pain if it's packaged as faithfulness. But God never intended for your soul to be in a constant state of chaos just to keep someone in your life. When you lose your peace to maintain a connection, you're trading your divine covering for emotional survival. And that's not what God wants for you. He is not glorified in your confusion. He is not honored by your exhaustion. He is not demanding your torment to prove your love. What He wants is your obedience. And sometimes obedience means letting go so He can restore what's been broken. Starting with you. Relationships are meant to reflect God's nature, His kindness, His patience, His truth, His love. If you find yourself constantly anxious, drained, afraid to speak, walking on emotional eggshells, or silencing your spirit just to keep someone from leaving, that is not the fruit of the Spirit. It's the sign of spiritual suffocation. That is not sacrifice, that is survival. And God didn't call you to survive love. He called you to experience it fully in truth and grace. Peace is not the absence of difficulty. It's the presence of divine order. God can give you peace even in a storm. But if the person you're holding on to is the storm, you need to stop asking God to calm what He's calling you to walk away from. Sometimes we spiritualize dysfunction. We stay in relationships that rob our peace and say we're trusting God, when in reality, we're afraid of change. We cling to people who no longer align with our growth because we don't want to hurt them, not realizing we're bleeding internally. But God sees what we're afraid to confront. He knows the burden your soul has been carrying, and He's not angry with your heartache. He wants to heal it. And sometimes healing begins with release. You are not being unfaithful by letting go of what's slowly destroying your spirit. You're not being disobedient by choosing peace over pain. You're being wise. You're being honest. And you're finally making space for God to step in. When God is in a relationship, peace is not forced. It flows. That doesn't mean everything will be perfect, but it does mean there is safety in presence. Conversations bring clarity, not confusion. Love builds you. It doesn't break you. Correction comes with care, not control. You don't have to pretend to be less than what you are to keep the relationship functioning. And if you do, it's time to ask yourself the hard question. Is this person drawing me closer to God or pushing me further from myself? Peace is one of the ways the Holy Spirit confirms alignment. When it disappears, pay attention. Don't ignore that quiet discomfort in your spirit. That's not just emotional weariness. It's a spiritual signal. And the longer you ignore it, the more damage it does. Staying in the wrong place too long doesn't just delay destiny, it distorts identity. You begin to lose the sound of your own voice, the shape of your own calling, the rhythm of your own walk with God. And for what? To keep a relationship God never required? Peace isn't something you stumble into, it's something you protect. And protecting it may mean setting boundaries, having hard conversations, or walking away altogether. It may look like disappointing others so you can stop disappointing your own soul. It may feel lonely, but peace often feels quiet at first because you've been living in so much noise. Don't confuse that quiet with emptiness. That stillness is sacred. It's the space where God begins to restore you, realign you, and reveal what He's been trying to say all along. You don't have to fight for the approval of someone who was never assigned to your future. You don't have to beg to be heard or twist yourself into someone you're not just to be seen. You were not created to be tolerated. You were made to be cherished. And God, who is the author of peace, will never demand that you abandon your inner wholeness just to prove your loyalty to someone who doesn't value it. You don't have to explain to everyone why you chose peace. You just have to walk in it. You don't owe anyone a justification for obeying what your spirit knows is right. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is say no more. No more sacrificing peace to keep someone comfortable. No more ignoring your convictions for the sake of connection. No more staying silent to avoid conflict. You were not called to be a prisoner in the name of love. You were called to live in freedom and peace. God doesn't need your pain to teach you loyalty. He wants to lead you through peace into purpose. So when it comes to keeping someone in your life at the cost of your peace, remember this: God would never ask you to do that. He is not the voice of guilt or pressure. He is the voice of grace and truth. And when He speaks, peace follows. Always. Growth that requires shrinking is not God's plan. God never called you to become less of who He created you to be, just to make others feel more comfortable. Yet many of us find ourselves in relationships, environments, or systems where our spiritual, emotional, or personal development feels like a threat rather than a testimony. Instead of being celebrated, our growth is met with silence, resistance, or resentment. Against many, God never calls us to create in our life to allow us to growth or to allow us to be who we are. You don't need a better job. You don't need a better car. You don't need a better job. You don't need a better car. We start to downplay our victories, mute our voice, and second guess our calling. Not because we've lost clarity, but because we're surrounded by people who can't handle our becoming. But hear this clearly. God didn't put purpose in you just so you could minimize it for the sake of false peace or artificial connection. If your evolution causes someone else to feel insecure, that's not your burden to carry. It's not your job to shrink into the version of yourself they can tolerate. It's your calling to step into the version God has destined you to be. Too often, we confuse humility with hiding. We think being kind means being small. We assume being loving means being silent. But humility isn't about denying your identity. It's about anchoring it in the truth that all you are and all you become flows from God. Drinking to appease someone's ego or to preserve a relationship that cannot survive your next level is not humility, it's spiritual self-sabotage. God doesn't ask you to kill your purpose to keep someone else from feeling threatened. The truth is, some people were fine with who you were when you were broken, insecure, or silent because your dysfunction didn't challenge them. But now that you're healing, now that you're hearing God more clearly, now that you're walking in authority, their comfort is being disrupted. And instead of adjusting to your growth, they try to shrink you back down to their comfort zone. That is not alignment. That is bondage disguised as loyalty. When God starts stretching you, it's not just about what's ahead. It's also about what you have to leave behind. Sometimes that means people, sometimes that means mindset, sometimes it means old versions of you that were never meant to last. God's plan for your life was never small. He created you in His image, breathed destiny into your lungs, and called you to be a light in a dark world. You cannot be a light if you keep dimming your fire. You cannot carry purpose if you keep apologizing for being anointed. Gentle light in your heart, you cannot keep up a fire. God's plan for your life comes from God. He cannot keep up a fire. God's plan for your life, you cannot keep up a fire. God's plan for your life is not a picnic. You cannot fulfill your calling if you're constantly trimming yourself down to stay inside the box someone else built for you. And let's be honest, boxes feel safe, but they're also prisons. You were not created to live contained. God calls you to stretch, to expand, to break past the limitations others try to place on you. And every time you choose to shrink to keep the peace, you delay your breakthrough. The answer is every time you choose to shrink to keep the peace, you delay your breakthrough. Every time you silence your voice because you fear it's too loud, you mute the very message God placed inside of you to heal someone else. Every time you pretend you don't see what God is showing you just to keep someone else comfortable in denial, you grieve the Spirit that's trying to lead you forward. Growth isn't just about becoming more. It's about shedding what no longer fits. And that includes shrinking behaviors that kept you safe in the past, but are suffocating you now. You don't have to carry guilt for outgrowing a place or a person. Some people were assigned to your past, not your future. And that's okay. You can honor what they meant to you without halting your progress to keep the connection. True love, true friendship, true community, these things do not require you to shrink. They support your growth. They celebrate your progress. They hold space for your evolution even when it's unfamiliar. Godly relationships will never manipulate you into stagnation. They will push you toward purpose, even if it means they have to grow too. But people who are committed to comfort more than calling will always see your growth as betrayal. Don't internalize that. Don't let their fear become your ceiling. Your obedience to God's voice has to outweigh your need for their approval. You can't follow God fully if your heart is tethered to the expectations of people who only loved the limited version of you. Let them go if they can't grow. The truth is, growth is uncomfortable, not just for you, but for those around you. And sometimes when you start to rise, it reveals the insecurities in others. That's not your fault. That's a decision they have to make, either to grow with you or watch you grow from a distance. But don't you dare shrink back. Don't you dare question the journey God has you on. Don't you dare settle for spiritual survival just to maintain earthly acceptance. If God has called you higher, then higher is where you must go. Even if it means climbing alone for a season. Even if it means climbing alone for a season. Even if it means walking through a door others won't follow you through. Don't fear losing people. Fear losing people. Don't let it discourage you. God can't lead you there, but He can show you the way out. You don't have to listen to anybody, because the version of you that honors God most is the one that refuses to shrink for anything or anyone. Growth isn't rebellion, it's obedience. It's the evidence that God is still working on you, through you, and around you. And you owe it to Him and to yourself to keep becoming all that He created you to be. Trying to reopen doors God has already closed is not love. It's disobedience. It may feel like hope. It may feel like faith. It may even feel like forgiveness. But if God has clearly shut the door, trying to pry it open again isn't an act of spiritual persistence. It's an act of mistrust. Because when God closes a door, He's not being cruel, He's being protective. He's not rejecting you, He's redirecting you. He's being protective. He knows what's behind that door. He knows what you don't. And He knows that if you walk back through it, you're not just revisiting your past, you're delaying your destiny. Yet out of fear, loneliness, or nostalgia, we often find ourselves staring at closed doors, knocking on what God has already said no to, hoping that maybe, just maybe, the outcome will be different this time. But every time you revisit what God has already released you from, you are choosing familiarity over faith. You are choosing your will over His word. And you are binding yourself to a chapter that God has already finished writing. There are reasons God closes doors. Some relationships were damaging your spirit more than you realized. Some opportunities were distractions dressed as blessings. Some paths looked good but would have led you straight into spiritual compromise. But because your heart was attached, because you didn't see the danger, God, out of His mercy, stepped in and closed it. And instead of thanking Him for protecting you, you started trying to resurrect what He buried. You called it loyalty. You called it love. You said maybe it was just bad timing, but what you're really doing is arguing with divine wisdom. You're telling God, I know this isn't your will, but it's still what I want. That is not faith. That's idolatry. Because when your desire for someone or something outweighs your obedience to God's direction, that thing has become your idol. That is when your desire for someone or something outweighs your obedience to God's direction. That thing has become your idol. That is when your desire for someone or something outweighs your obedience to God's direction. That requires your obedience. And idols don't bless you, they break you. The danger in reopening doors is that you're stepping back into a space you were never meant to survive twice. God brought you out of it for a reason. He saw what you were becoming. He saw how your spirit was shrinking. He saw how your peace was eroding. He saw the compromises you were starting to make just to keep it alive. And in His grace, He said, no more. But your flesh doesn't forget the comfort, the familiarity, the memories. So instead of moving forward, you sit at the door, replaying the good times, forgetting the tears, forgetting the toll. You think you're fighting for love, but you're actually fighting against God. And no matter how hard you try, no matter how many tears you cry, no matter how many prayers you whisper, God will not bless what He has already released. And so instead of moving forward, you will release the debt to death. You think you're fighting for love, but you're actually fighting against God. And no matter how hard you play, God will not stop. Unless you fess up, He will not pour favor into what He has shut off. Not because He's punishing you, but because He's preserving you. Because His plan is greater than your preference. And because what's ahead of you is better than what you're trying to revive. Sometimes we confuse love with attachment. We think that because we feel deeply, it must mean something spiritually significant. But feelings are not always confirmation. Sometimes they're tests. God wants to know if you'll trust Him beyond your emotions. If you'll let Him be Lord over your longing. If you'll walk by faith even when your feelings beg you to stay. Reopening a door that God closed might satisfy your temporary need for connection, but it will bankrupt your soul of the peace that only comes through obedience. Every time you return to what God closed, you're stepping out of the covering He placed over your life. And the longer you stay outside that covering, the more vulnerable you become, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And eventually you'll start to wonder why you feel stuck, why you feel empty, why everything seems off. It's because you're walking backward while asking God to lead you forward. You can't walk into your future while clinging to your past. You can't walk in alignment while chasing something God has already ended. There is healing and closure, but only if you stop trying to open it. The healing begins when you say, God, I trust you enough to let go of what I thought I needed. It begins when you stop begging for old doors to open and start thanking God for the ones He's preparing. And yes, it will hurt. Yes, you will grieve. Yes, you will wrestle with the silence. But on the other side of obedience is a peace the past could never give you. On the other side of letting go is a joy that doesn't come with compromise. On the other side of surrender is a purpose that can breathe again because it's no longer suffocated by disobedience. God is not trying to steal something from you. He's trying to save you. He's not saying no to hurt you. He's saying no to heal you. He's closing them so you can learn to walk in wholeness. So stop knocking. Stop rereading old texts. Stop stalking what He already shut down. Stop dragging your heart through a door that can no longer hold the weight of your destiny. God knows what you need, and He knows what needs to be removed.